The settlement of New Terra sat on the edge of human-controlled space, a collection of silver domes and landing platforms built into the red rock of an alien world. Commander Jake Morrison stood in his small office, looking out at the sunset that painted the sky in shades of purple and orange. He had been running training simulations for new pilots for 3 years now, ever since he left active military service. The work was quiet, peaceful even, which was exactly what he wanted after 20 years of war. Jake was not a tall man, but he carried himself with the confidence of someone who had survived countless battles. His hair had started to turn gray at the temples, and his face showed the lines of too many sleepless nights spent planning military operations. Most people on New Terra knew his name. During the Human Covenant Wars, he had won battles that everyone said were impossible to win. He saved Kepler Station when it was under attack. He defeated entire pirate fleets with only 2 working ships. His strategies were taught in military academies across human space. But Jake did not like to talk about those days anymore. He preferred the simple life of teaching young pilots how to think clearly under pressure. He enjoyed his coffee in the morning and his quiet evenings reading old books. The last thing he wanted was to be dragged back into the spotlight. That peaceful life ended when the Zenith Empire arrived. Their ships appeared in orbit without warning, massive vessels that made human warships look like toys. The Zenith were one of the oldest civilizations in the galaxy, with technology that seemed like magic to younger species. They had been exploring the stars for thousands of years while humans were still learning to make fire. Their empire stretched across hundreds of systems, and they viewed newcomers like humanity with a mixture of curiosity and condescension. Leading the fleet was Princess Lyra, daughter of the Zenith Emperor and commander of the Imperial Guard. She was young by Zenith standards, only 300 years old, but she had never lost a battle in her life. Every species in the galaxy knew her name. She was a master strategist who had defeated the greatest military minds from dozens of different worlds. Her victories were legendary, her tactics studied by military leaders everywhere. Governor Helen Pierce called an emergency meeting in the colony's main hall. Jake sat in the back, hoping to avoid attention, but Helen spotted him immediately. The governor was a practical woman in her 50s, with short brown hair and tired eyes that had seen too many political battles. "We are honored by your visit, Princess Lyra," Helen said as the tall, elegant alien entered the hall. Lyra's skin had a faint blue tint, and her eyes were large and golden. She wore robes that seemed to shimmer with their own light. "Governor Pierce," Lyra said, her voice carrying easily through the room, "I come with a proposition for your colony. The Zenith Empire wishes to test the capabilities of humanity through a war game simulation. I challenge your best strategic mind to face me in combat." The room fell silent. Everyone understood what this meant. The Zenith did not make casual challenges. This was a test, a way to measure humanity's worth in the galactic community. "The terms are simple," Lyra continued. "If I win, humanity will cede mining rights to 3 asteroid fields in this sector. If your champion wins, the Zenith Empire will share our advanced propulsion technology with your species." She smiled, and there was amusement in her expression. "Of course, I do not expect to lose. I am simply curious to see how these primitive newcomers approach warfare." The word primitive stung. Jake felt anger rise in his chest, but he kept his face neutral. He had dealt with arrogant opponents before. After the meeting, Helen found Jake in the corridor. "I need you to accept this challenge," she said without preamble. "No," Jake replied. "I'm retired, Helen. Find someone else." "There is no one else. You know that. Every tactical officer on New Terra has studied your battles. You are the best we have. I'm a teacher now, not a warrior." Helen grabbed his arm. "Jake, this is bigger than you or me. If we refuse, we look weak. If we send someone inexperienced and lose badly, we look incompetent. Either way, humanity's reputation suffers. We need you." Jake pulled away and kept walking. But that evening, his old friend Amy Rodriguez came to his apartment. Amy was a lieutenant who had served under him during the war. She was a short woman with dark hair and a sharp mind. "You should take the challenge," Amy said, sitting across from him. "Everyone keeps telling me what I should do," Jake muttered. "Because everyone knows you are the only one who can win. Lyra has studied our tactics, Jake. She has watched recordings of human battles. She thinks she knows how we fight. But she has never faced you personally. She has never experienced what makes you different. And what makes me different? Amy smiled. You do not fight like you were taught. You fight like a human who refuses to lose. You break rules. You do impossible things. You make your enemies question everything they know. That is what we need right now. Jake looked out his window at the Zenith ships in orbit. They were beautiful and terrifying at the same time. He thought about what Lyra had said. Primitive newcomers. Maybe it was time to teach an old empire a lesson about underestimating humanity. Fine, he said quietly. I'll do it. The neutral station where the war game would take place floated in empty space between human and Zenith territory. It was a massive structure built by the Galactic Council specifically for diplomatic events and competitions like this one. The simulation chamber was the size of a sports stadium, filled with holographic projectors that could create incredibly realistic battle scenarios. Jake arrived 2 days before the challenge. He spent those days studying the simulation systems and reviewing everything he knew about Zenith military doctrine. Amy came with him, along with Ben Cooper, a young analyst who specialized in alien combat strategies. Ben was nervous and excited, constantly checking his datapad and muttering calculations under his breath. The Zenith fight with overwhelming precision, Ben explained during one of their planning sessions. They calculate optimal firing solutions, perfect formations, and efficient resource allocation. Every move is planned 3 steps ahead. It is like playing chess against a computer. Good, Jake said. Computers are predictable. The day of the challenge arrived. The simulation chamber filled with spectators from dozens of different species. Millions more watched via live broadcast across the galaxy. This was not just a game between 2 commanders. It was humanity's debut on the galactic stage, a chance to prove they belonged among the great powers of the cosmos. Jake entered his command pod, a spherical room surrounded by holographic displays. He could see his virtual fleet, 50 ships of various classes, each one responding to his commands with realistic physics. Across the simulated battlefield, Princess Lyra commanded her own fleet from an identical pod. The simulation began. Jake watched as Lyra's fleet moved into a classic Zenith formation, a hammer and anvil design meant to trap enemies between 2 overwhelming forces. It was textbook strategy, executed with perfect precision. Her ships moved like dancers, each one in exactly the right position at the right time. Jake responded with a standard human defensive formation, placing his strongest ships at the center and lighter vessels on the flanks. It was the kind of setup any military academy graduate would use. He wanted Lyra to think he was conventional, predictable, safe. Lyra's hammer fell. Her heavy cruisers concentrated their fire on Jake's center while her fast attack ships swept around to hit his flanks. The tactic was brutal and efficient. Within an hour, Jake had lost 5 ships. His fleet was forced to retreat, and the first engagement ended in a clear victory for the princess. During the break between rounds, Lyra gave an interview to the galactic press. Her image appeared on screens throughout the station. The human commander fights adequately, she said with a slight smile. His tactics are quaint, predictable even. I expected more creativity from a species so young, but perhaps their reputation is exaggerated. This will be over quickly. In his command pod, Jake watched the interview with Amy and Ben. The young analyst looked worried. She destroyed us, Commander. Maybe we should change our approach. No, Jake said calmly. This is exactly what I wanted. She thinks she has me figured out. She thinks I am just another conventional officer following the standard playbook. But you lost 5 ships, Ben protested. Amy put a hand on Ben's shoulder. Trust him. Jake always has a plan. The second engagement began. This time, Lyra was even more aggressive. She had studied Jake's defensive formation and knew exactly how to counter it. Her fleet moved with mechanical precision, exploiting every weakness. Jake lost 7 more ships before retreating again. Spectators began to laugh at the human effort. Clearly, this was going to be a massacre. Lord Kale, Lyra's senior advisor, spoke with her between the 2nd and 3rd rounds. He was an older Zenith with silver markings on his face. Princess, I urge caution. Humans are known for their unpredictability. This commander may be luring you into overconfidence. Lyra dismissed the concern with a wave of her hand. I have studied every battle Jake Morrison ever fought. I know his patterns, his preferences, his weaknesses. He is skilled for a human, but he cannot match Zenith training and discipline. I am simply demonstrating our superiority. Then why do you keep using the same tactics? Kale asked quietly. Because they work, Lyra replied. Why would I change a winning strategy? The third engagement followed the same pattern. Jake tried different variations of defensive tactics, but Lyra crushed each one with ruthless efficiency. By the end, Jake had lost 22 ships total while Lyra had only lost 3. The gap was enormous. Many viewers began to turn off their broadcasts, assuming the outcome was already decided. But in his command pod, Jake was smiling. Amy noticed and raised an eyebrow. You are enjoying this? She is falling for it perfectly, Jake said. Watch her fleet movements. Every attack follows Zenith doctrine exactly. She wins by being more precise than her opponents, by calculating better, by executing perfectly. But she has never faced anyone who does not care about perfect execution. Ben looked at the tactical display, confused. I do not understand. How does losing help us? Jake pulled up a detailed analysis of Lyra's attack patterns. I have been feeding her a false pattern. Every defensive formation I used had deliberate weaknesses in specific places. She found those weaknesses and exploited them, just like her training taught her. Now she thinks she knows how I think. She expects me to defend, to try to minimize losses, to fight conservatively. And you are not going to do that? Amy asked, though she already knew the answer. Not even close, Jake said. Next round, we stop playing by the rules. It is time to show her what human warfare really looks like. Amy grinned. She had seen this before, during the war. This was the moment when Jake Morrison stopped being a military officer and became something else entirely. Something dangerous. The break ended, and both commanders returned to their pods for the fourth engagement. Lyra settled into her command chair, confident and relaxed. She had already planned her next 5 moves, anticipating every possible response Jake might make. Victory was certain. But when the simulation started, something changed. Jake's fleet did not form up in a defensive position. Instead, his ships scattered in seemingly random directions, breaking into small groups that moved independently. There was no formation, no clear strategy, just chaos. Lyra stared at her displays, momentarily confused. This made no sense. A scattered fleet was vulnerable, easy to defeat in detail. Was Jake panicking? Had he given up? She ordered her fleet to pursue, planning to crush each small group individually. That was when Jake's real strategy began. Lyra's fleet moved to engage the scattered human ships, expecting easy victories. But nothing went as planned. One group of Jake's vessels appeared to be fleeing in panic, engines flaring at maximum thrust. When Lyra's scouts pursued, the human ships suddenly reversed course and opened fire at point-blank range. The Zenith scouts, caught completely by surprise, were destroyed before they could react. Another group of human ships drifted through space as if their systems had failed. Lyra sent a small force to investigate and potentially capture them. As the Zenith vessels approached, the human ships suddenly powered up and launched a coordinated attack. They had been playing dead, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Jake's fleet fought like nothing Lyra had ever encountered. They used tactics that no military academy would ever teach. Some ships performed kamikaze runs, sacrificing themselves to damage multiple enemy vessels. Others pretended to retreat, then ambushed pursuers in debris fields. Jake even ordered some of his damaged ships to self-destruct near enemy formations, using the explosions as weapons. In her command pod, Lyra felt something she had not experienced in centuries: confusion. Her perfect strategies were failing. Every calculation she made was wrong because Jake refused to follow any logical pattern. His ships moved like a swarm of angry insects, impossible to predict or pin down. He is not fighting a military battle, Lord Kale observed from his position beside her. He is fighting for survival. There is a difference. This is chaos, Lyra said, her voice tight with frustration. There is no discipline, no coordination. How can he control his fleet like this? Perhaps he is not trying to control it, Kale suggested. Perhaps he is letting each group act independently, adapting to local conditions. It is inefficient by our standards, but effective against an opponent who expects order. Lyra refused to accept this. She had trained her entire life to be the perfect commander. She knew every tactical manual, every historical battle, every proven strategy. Chaos could not defeat order. It was impossible. She ordered her fleet to concentrate, to form a solid wall of firepower that would overwhelm these scattered human ships. But Jake had anticipated this response. As Lyra's ships pulled together, his scattered groups suddenly converged from multiple directions. They hit the concentrated zenith formation from 6 different angles simultaneously, creating crossfire and confusion. Several zenith ships accidentally fired on each other in the chaos. The 4th engagement ended with Jake losing 18 ships but destroying 15 of Lyra's vessels. The gap was closing. More importantly, the psychological advantage had shifted. Lyra was no longer certain of victory. She was reacting instead of planning, responding to threats instead of executing strategy. During the break, viewers across the galaxy began to take notice. The human was not just fighting anymore. He was competing. Analysis programs tried to find patterns in Jake's tactics but came up empty. Sports commentators debated whether his approach was genius or madness. Bets were placed in countless alien gambling houses. Jake sat in his pod, reviewing the last engagement with Amy and Ben. The young analyst looked excited now instead of worried. "That was incredible, Commander. Did you see the way their formation collapsed when we hit from multiple angles? They are not trained to handle that kind of chaos." Zenith military doctrine emphasizes unity and coordination, Amy explained. Their strength comes from everyone working together perfectly. But that also means if you disrupt their coordination, the whole system breaks down. Jake nodded. Lyra is brilliant, probably the best tactician I have ever faced. But she has only fought opponents who play the same game she does. Opponents who value efficiency and optimal solutions. She has never fought someone who is willing to be inefficient if it means winning. "What about the next round?" Ben asked. "Now we change everything again," Jake said with a slight smile. "She is expecting more chaos, more unpredictability. So we give her perfect order instead. Keep her guessing. Never let her settle into a rhythm." In her command pod, Lyra was having a very different conversation with Lord Kale. The princess was visibly frustrated, her golden eyes narrowed in concentration. "I need to adapt. He uses chaos, so I must learn to embrace chaos as well." "Princess," Kale said carefully, "you cannot simply adopt his methods. Your training, your instincts, everything about how you think is built on order and precision. If you try to fight like a human, you will lose what makes you strong." "Then what do you suggest?" Lyra demanded. "Remember who you are. You are Zenith. You have advantages he cannot match, superior technology, better training, more experience. Use those advantages. Stop trying to predict him and start forcing him to react to you." Lyra considered this advice. Kale was right. She had been so focused on countering Jake's tactics that she had forgotten her own strengths. In the next engagement, she would not chase his ships around like a confused predator. She would set the terms of battle and make him come to her. The 5th engagement began. Lyra positioned her remaining 30 ships in a defensive formation around a simulated asteroid field. She was not going to chase Jake anymore. Let him come to her, let him attack a prepared position. Her ships had better shields, better weapons, better everything. If he wanted to win, he would have to come through her. Jake saw the change immediately. He studied Lyra's defensive position for several minutes, saying nothing. Amy watched him, waiting for orders. Finally, Jake smiled. She learned. Good for her. "So what do we do?" Ben asked. "We give her exactly what she does not expect," Jake replied. "We attack using perfect Zenith tactics." Both Amy and Ben stared at him. "You want to attack a fortified position using their own strategies?" Amy asked. "That is suicide." Their defensive doctrine is designed to counter their own offensive doctrine. Exactly, Jake said. Which is why she will not expect it. She thinks I only know chaos. Time to show her I can play her game too. Jake's remaining 32 ships formed into a classic zenith hammer and anvil formation. They moved with precision, maintaining perfect intervals and firing solutions. It looked like a zenith fleet, moved like a zenith fleet. Lyra watched in amazement as the human commander executed her own tactics with surprising competence. But Jake had studied zenith warfare for decades. He knew their strategies inside and out. More importantly, he knew their weaknesses. The hammer and anvil only worked if both sides committed fully to the attack. Jake's hammer committed completely, but his anvil held back at the last second, creating a gap in Lyra's defensive line. Lyra recognized the feint and tried to adjust, but Jake had already exploited the opening. His reserve ships, the ones that should have formed the anvil, instead punched through the gap and attacked Lyra's command ship directly. It was a violation of Zenith tactical doctrine, which stated that you never abandoned a formation once committed. But Jake was not Zenith. He was human. The engagement ended with both fleets badly damaged. Jake was down to 15 ships. Lyra had 25. But Jake had proven something important. He could fight any way he needed to. Chaos or order, conventional or bizarre, it did not matter. He would use whatever worked. The galactic audience was completely engaged now. What had started as an expected massacre had become a real competition. News feeds across hundreds of worlds discussed the battle. Military analysts debated Jake's unconventional methods. Some called him a genius. Others said he was lucky. Everyone agreed that Princess Lyra had finally met an opponent who could challenge her. In her command pod, Lyra felt something she had not experienced in a very long time: doubt. Every assumption she made about Jake Morrison turned out to be wrong. When she expected chaos, he gave her order. When she expected order, he gave her chaos. He was always one step ahead, not because he was smarter or faster, but because he refused to be predictable. Lord Kale watched the princess carefully. "You are learning, my lady. That is good." "Learning what?" Lyra asked bitterly. "That I know nothing. That all my training and experience mean nothing against someone who ignores the rules." "You are learning humility," Kale said gently. "And you are learning that there are many ways to wage war. The Zenith way is not the only way. Perhaps not even the best way." Lyra wanted to argue, but she could not. Jake had proven that point over and over. She pulled up historical records of his past battles and studied them carefully during the break. The Battle of Kepler Station, where he evacuated thousands of civilians using mining drones as decoys while pirates chased ghosts. The Siege of New Berlin, where he surrendered his ships to an enemy fleet, then retook them from the inside 12 hours later. The ambush at the Red Nebula, where he convinced a superior force that they were surrounded by using fake sensor readings and debris fields. Every victory came from doing something unexpected, something that violated conventional military wisdom. Jake Morrison did not fight to demonstrate skill or honor. He fought to win, no matter what it took. That was the human way. That was what made them dangerous. The sixth engagement began. Both commanders were exhausted now, having spent hours in intense concentration. Jake's remaining 15 ships faced Lyra's 25. The numbers favored the princess, but numbers had stopped mattering somewhere along the way. Lyra decided to try something different. Instead of following doctrine, she attempted to predict what Jake would do and counter it before he acted. If he zigged, she would already be zagging. She divided her fleet into 3 groups, each capable of independent action but coordinated through her central command. It was the closest thing to human chaos that Zenith training allowed. And for the first few minutes, it worked. Jake's ships moved into an attack formation, and Lyra's groups responded perfectly, cutting off his angles and forcing him to retreat. She destroyed 3 of his ships with minimal losses. But Jake adapted faster than she expected. He recognized what she was trying to do and changed his entire approach mid-battle. Instead of attacking as a group, his ships started acting as true individuals, each one making its own decisions. There was no central command anymore, just 12 separate vessels fighting their own private wars against Lyra's 3 groups. The battle descended into beautiful chaos. Ships dodged and weaved through space, firing at targets of opportunity. Explosions lit up the simulated battlefield. Neither commander was truly in control anymore. They had both unleashed forces that operated on instinct and training rather than orders. When the engagement ended, both fleets were shattered. Jake had 8 ships left. Lyra had 12. The audience sat in stunned silence. No one had ever seen anything like this. 2 masters of warfare, pushed to their absolute limits, having abandoned everything they knew in favor of pure survival instinct. During the break, Jake sat quietly in his pod. He was tired, truly tired. Amy brought him water and looked concerned. "You need to rest, Commander. This is taking everything you have." "So is she," Jake replied, nodding toward the display showing Lyra's pod. "Look at her. She is exhausted too. This is not just a battle of ships anymore. It is a battle of wills. Whoever breaks first loses." Ben checked the simulation parameters. 4 more engagements are scheduled, but at this rate, neither of you will have any ships left after 2 more rounds. The simulation might end in mutual destruction. "Then we need to make every shot count," Jake said simply. Across the battlefield, Lyra was reaching a similar conclusion. She looked at Lord Kale with new understanding. "I underestimated him. Not his skill, but his determination. He does not fight like someone trying to win a game. He fights like someone defending his home." "All human warriors fight that way," Kale explained. "They are a young species in a dangerous galaxy. Every battle is existential to them. They have not had the luxury of fighting for sport or honor. They fight to survive, always." Lyra stood and looked out at the stars beyond her pod. "The Zenith Empire has been dominant for so long that we forgot what that feels like. We forgot what it means to truly need victory rather than simply expect it." The 7th engagement began with both commanders showing new respect for each other. There were no grand strategies anymore, no clever tricks. Just 2 skilled opponents trying to outthink each other with dwindling resources. Jake lost 3 ships. Lyra lost 4. Every loss hurt now because there were so few ships remaining. The 8th engagement was even more brutal. Jake was down to his last 5 ships, including his command vessel. Lyra had 8 ships, but they were all damaged. The simulation had moved beyond tactics into something more primal. This was about who could endure longer, who could push through exhaustion and doubt to find one more clever idea, one more desperate gambit. Jake pulled his remaining ships into a tight defensive formation. He was protecting his command ship, the last piece he could not afford to lose. Lyra saw the formation and understood. Jake was making his final stand. If she could break through and destroy his flagship, the game would be over. She ordered a full assault, committing all 8 of her ships to a coordinated attack. It was the right tactical decision. Overwhelming force against a desperate defense. But Jake had been waiting for exactly this moment. He had been preparing for it since the beginning. As Lyra's ships closed in, Jake's other 4 vessels suddenly broke formation and scattered again. They were not running away. They were positioning themselves for one final, desperate strike. Jake was using himself as bait, drawing Lyra's entire fleet into a trap. The 4 human ships opened fire from unexpected angles, pouring everything they had into Lyra's attacking force. 2 Zenith vessels were destroyed immediately. But Lyra's remaining ships pressed forward, knowing they had to finish this. They focused all their weapons on Jake's command ship. Jake's shields failed. His hull breached. Alarms blared in his pod as the simulation showed his ship taking catastrophic damage. But he did not stop fighting. He returned fire even as his vessel broke apart, destroying 2 more of Lyra's ships. The engagement ended with Jake having only his heavily damaged flagship remaining. Lyra had 4 ships left, but they were in better condition. By any measure, she was winning. But it did not feel like winning. It felt like fighting a war of attrition against an opponent who refused to surrender. The audience across the galaxy watched in awe. This was not entertainment anymore. This was witnessing 2 legends push each other beyond all reasonable limits. This was seeing what warriors truly became when everything else was stripped away. The final break felt different from all the others. Everyone knew this was it. 1 more engagement, maybe 2 at most. Both commanders had proven themselves beyond any doubt. Now it was just about who would cross the finish line first. Jake sat in his command pod with his eyes closed. Amy and Ben had stopped offering advice. There was nothing left to say. Jake had taken this battle as far as anyone possibly could. His heavily damaged flagship against 4 Zenith vessels. The odds were impossible. But then again, Jake Morrison had built his entire career on doing impossible things. In her pod, Princess Lyra felt no satisfaction. Yes, she was going to win. The numbers guaranteed it. But this was not the easy victory she had expected. This was not a demonstration of Zenith superiority. This was a brutal, exhausting fight that had pushed her to her absolute limits. Jake Morrison had earned something rare, her complete respect. "Whatever happens in this final engagement," Lyra said to Lord Kale, "make sure the humans know they fought with honor. Make sure the galaxy knows that Jake Morrison is a worthy opponent." "You sound as if you expect to lose," Kale observed. Lyra smiled sadly. "I have 4 ships to his 1. I will win. But he has already won something more important. He has proven that humanity belongs at the table with the great powers. That is what this challenge was always really about." The 9th engagement began. Jake's battered flagship limped forward, systems failing, weapons barely functional. Lyra's 4 ships moved to surround him, executing a perfect encirclement that would allow no escape. This should have been the end. A quick, merciful finish to an incredible fight. But Jake had one last card to play. As Lyra's ships closed in, he broadcast a message on all frequencies. "Princess Lyra, I propose a different ending to our game. One final duel. Your flagship against mine. No support vessels. Just commander against commander. Are you brave enough to face me alone?" The audience erupted in excitement. This was perfect drama. The entire battle coming down to a single ship-to-ship duel. But Lyra hesitated. Jake's flagship was badly damaged. She could simply refuse the challenge and destroy him with superior numbers. That would be the smart tactical choice. Lord Kale leaned close. "Princess, you do not have to accept. You can win right now." "But that is not how legends are made," Lyra replied. She keyed her communication system. "Commander Morrison, I accept your challenge. All ships, withdraw. This battle ends between the 2 of us alone." The supporting vessels on both sides pulled back, creating a clear space in the center of the battlefield. 2 flagships, battered and damaged, faced each other across empty space. The entire galaxy watched. This was the moment everything had been building toward. The ships began to circle each other slowly, like ancient gunslingers preparing to draw. Jake's vessel was clearly in worse shape, listing to one side, trailing debris. Lyra's flagship was damaged too, but still functional. She had superior firepower, better shields, more maneuvering capability. Every advantage was hers. They opened fire simultaneously. Energy beams and missiles crossed the void between them. Jake's ship shook from multiple impacts. Alarms blared. His shields were at 15% and dropping. But he kept firing, kept maneuvering, kept fighting with everything he had left. Lyra pressed her advantage, moving to get behind Jake's ship where his damaged engines made him vulnerable. This was it. One more good hit and the battle would be over. She lined up her shot carefully, preparing to fire her main weapons at his weakest point. That was when Jake did the impossible. He overloaded his failing engines, dumping every bit of remaining power into them for one final burst of speed. The maneuver was suicidal. His engines would tear themselves apart from the strain. But for 3 seconds, his crippled ship moved faster than Lyra's undamaged vessel. Jake's flagship spun in a complete rotation, using the engine overload to flip entirely around. The move was physically impossible according to standard ship design. It should not have worked. But Jake had calculated the exact moment when his ship's structural failure would actually help the rotation instead of preventing it. He was using his ship's damage as a weapon. The rotation put Jake directly behind Lyra's flagship. For one perfect moment, he had a clear shot at her engines while she was still oriented the wrong direction. Jake fired everything. Every weapon, every missile, every last bit of ammunition his ship had left. The barrage struck Lyra's engines dead center. Lyra's ship lurched forward, engines flickering. She tried to turn, but her maneuvering was compromised. She returned fire, her weapons hammering Jake's already devastated ship. Both flagships were dying now, trading shots at point-blank range, neither willing to back down. Jake's command pod shook violently. Screens exploded around him. Amy shouted a warning, but he could barely hear her over the alarms. His ship was coming apart. But he kept his hand on the firing control, kept pouring damage into Lyra's vessel. The simulation showed both ships erupting in simultaneous explosions. Light flooded the battlefield. When it cleared, both flagships were gone. Destroyed. The ninth engagement had ended in mutual destruction. The rules were clear. Mutual destruction counted as a draw. But the simulation computers had more detailed analysis. They calculated the exact timing of each ship's destruction down to fractions of a second. The results appeared on screens throughout the station. Jake Morrison's killing shot had struck Princess Lyra's flagship 0.3 seconds before her shot destroyed his ship. By the narrowest possible margin, Jake had won. The audience exploded in reaction. Some cheered, some argued, some simply sat in stunned silence. No one had ever seen anything like this. The greatest tactical mind in the Zenith Empire had been defeated by a human commander who refused to accept the concept of impossible odds. Jake emerged from his command pod, exhausted and drenched in sweat. He had to lean on Amy for support. His hands were shaking. Every muscle in his body ached. But he had done it. He had won. Princess Lyra stepped out of her own pod, looking equally exhausted. She walked across the observation deck toward Jake, and the entire station fell silent. Everyone waited to see how she would react to her first defeat in 300 years. Lyra stopped in front of Jake and bowed deeply, a gesture of profound respect in Zenith culture. "Commander Morrison, I underestimated you and your species. I thought this would be a simple demonstration of superiority. Instead, you taught me a lesson I badly needed to learn. You have earned the victory and my respect." Jake straightened despite his exhaustion and offered his hand. "Princess Lyra, you are the most skilled opponent I have ever faced. You pushed me further than any battle in my career. If you had been just a little less confident in the beginning, I would never have been able to gain the momentum I needed. You fought with incredible skill and honor." Lyra took his hand, shaking it firmly. "We Zenith fight with honor. But you humans fight to survive. There is wisdom in both approaches, I think. Perhaps we can learn from each other." Over the following days, the galaxy buzzed with news of the battle. Jake Morrison became a household name across hundreds of worlds. The human who defeated the undefeatable princess. The tactician who won with a single damaged ship against impossible odds. Songs were written about the battle. Military academies added it to their curriculum. But for Jake, the most important outcome was quieter. Princess Lyra honored the terms of their agreement, providing humanity with advanced propulsion technology. But she also did something unexpected. She requested permission to visit New Terra and study human military history with Jake himself. They spent weeks together, discussing tactics and strategy and the philosophy of warfare. Lyra wanted to understand how humans thought, what drove them to fight so creatively and desperately. Jake was happy to explain, and in return, he learned about Zenith tactics and the ancient wisdom of an empire that had survived for millennia. Amy found them one evening in Jake's office, surrounded by star charts and tactical displays, arguing cheerfully about the proper way to execute a flanking maneuver. "You two look like old friends," she observed with a smile. "We are," Lyra said simply. "War makes strange bonds between warriors." Jake nodded. "Besides, I learned something important from this battle. Being the best is not about always winning. It is about always learning, always adapting, always pushing yourself to be better than you were yesterday." Lyra looked at him with those golden eyes that had seen centuries of battles. "You already knew that, Jake. That is why you won." Eventually, Princess Lyra returned to the Zenith Empire, but she maintained regular contact with Jake. She had made a friend, something rare for someone of her position and power. More importantly, she had helped ensure that humanity would be treated with respect by the older civilizations of the galaxy. Jake returned to his quiet life on New Terra, back to training young pilots and drinking coffee in the morning. But he was no longer just a retired commander. He was the man who had faced a cosmic princess in battle and emerged victorious. He was living proof that humanity, young and reckless as they were, belonged among the stars. And sometimes, late at night, he would look up at those stars and smile. Because he knew that somewhere out there, Princess Lyra was looking at the same stars, probably planning their next rematch. And he was already thinking of new ways to surprise her.